Today's video takes us into the puzzling case of Kristine Johnson, a story that began as an ordinary day in Los Angeles, but quickly spiraled into a mystery filled with chilling revelations. What really happened to Kristine? Let's find out. Watch closely. A woman in a black hat, captured on surveillance footage at a Los Angeles mall on February 15, 2003. That woman is 21-year-old Kristine Johnson. At first glance, it looks like a routine shopping trip. But within hours of leaving this mall, Kristine vanished. The bags she carried, that day, the items she purchased, might be the last silent witnesses to what unfolded. Investigators dug into her phone records and discovered something unusual. Shortly after 5 p.m., Kristine made a call to a helpline from Laurel Canyon in the Hollywood Hills. A witness later reported seeing a young woman matching Kristine's description, stopping to ask for directions to a house further up the canyon. But beyond that, her trail went cold. Then, 5 days later, on February 20th, police received a tip that changed the scope of the case. A woman came forward after seeing Kristine's disappearance on the news. She told detectives that a few weeks earlier, a man had approached her at the exact same mall. He claimed to be working on the next James Bond film and tried to lure her into an audition. This disturbing account soon opened the door to a larger, far darker story. Detectives began connecting Kristine's disappearance to other similar reports. Stories of women in Hollywood who had all been approached by the same type of predator. A man who, for over a decade, had been weaving a web of deceit through promises of fame and opportunities that never existed. But to understand how Kristine became entangled in this deception, we need to go back to 2001. At 20 years old, Kristine Johnson left her small hometown of Saugatuck and moved to Southern California with dreams of making it in Hollywood. Like so many others, she believed Los Angeles could change her life. She picked up jobs to make ends meet, balancing classes and part-time work while chasing auditions. At one point, she landed a small role as a production assistant on a film, her first real taste of the industry. But the opportunities soon dried up. By 2003, she was working at a cell phone company, still clinging to her Hollywood dreams. And it was during this vulnerable time when she was struggling, but still hopeful, that she crossed paths with the wrong person. On Saturday, February 15th, 2003, Kristine Johnson spoke with her mother, Terry, over the phone. She mentioned she was planning a trip to the mall that afternoon. Terry encouraged her to treat herself to a Valentine's Day gift. They exchanged goodbyes, unaware it would be the last time Terry ever heard her daughter's voice. By February 17th, alarm bells were ringing. Kristine hadn't returned her mother's daily calls in more than 48 hours. Worried, Terry reached out to Kristine's workplace, only to learn that her daughter hadn't shown up for her shift and wasn't answering her cell phone. This was completely out of character. Kristine was always responsible and punctual. Fearing the worst, her family reported her missing and quickly flew to Los Angeles. Police updated them on the case and set up a dedicated tip line in hopes of gathering information. As days passed, Kristine's disappearance drew wider attention. Investigators checked her credit card records and discovered she had made several purchases at Westfield's Century City Mall on February 15th. Surveillance footage confirmed she had been at the mall around 1 p.m., but the images didn't provide any solid clues about where she went afterward. Detectives then interviewed Kristine's flatmate, who remembered her coming home that afternoon, excited to show off a new outfit she had bought. But soon after, Kristine mentioned she was heading out again for an important movie audition. This seemed like the first real lead. Unfortunately, her flatmate couldn't recall where the audition was supposed to take place, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. Investigators dug deeper into Kristine Johnson's final hours by reviewing her phone records. They discovered that just after 5 p.m. on February 15th, she had placed a call to a helpline from Laurel Canyon in the Hollywood Hills. A witness also came forward, reporting that they had seen a young woman resembling Kristine driving a white Miata. According to the witness, she had briefly stopped to ask for directions to a house further up the hill before disappearing completely. This revelation left her parents even more unsettled. Knowing more about where their daughter had been only intensified their fears. They began to suspect Kristine may have encountered someone she knew or someone who had been carefully watching her. Still, they refused to give up hope and continued doing everything possible to assist in the search. Police turned their attention to Kristine's ex-boyfriend. He admitted there had been incidents of domestic abuse during their relationship, but firmly denied having anything to do with her disappearance. He also claimed he wasn't even in town at the time she went missing. Story several witnesses later confirmed. With his alibi verified, investigators had no choice but to rule him out as a suspect, leaving the case at a standstill. Then came a major turning point. On February 20th, 2003, 5 days after Kristine vanished, a woman named Susan Murphy contacted police. After reading about Kristine's disappearance, Susan realized the circumstances sounded eerily similar to her own experience. Weeks earlier, she too had been approached by a man who invited her to a supposed movie audition. Hoping her account might help, she shared everything she remembered. Detective Virginia Ohnson immediately recognized Susan's story as the first real breakthrough in the case. What made her account even more compelling was that details about Kristine's mall purchases had never been released publicly yet. Susan instantly connected the dots, suspecting that the same man who targeted her might be linked to Kristine's disappearance. Working with Susan, investigators produced a composite sketch of the man she described. The image was broadcast nationwide, drawing widespread attention. Just days later, on February 24th, 9 days after Kristine went missing, police located her car. It had been sitting in a hotel's valet parking lot. When officers informed Kristine's parents, their worst fears deepened. Inside the car, they found only her cell phone. The valet explained that the car had been dropped off by a man on February 16th, just 1 day after Kristine disappeared. By February 27th, 12 days after Kristine vanished, there was still no sign of her. Her family refused to give up hope, organizing vigils in both Los Angeles and Michigan to keep her story alive. Meanwhile, the circulation of Susan Murphy's sketch encouraged more women to come forward, each with chillingly similar accounts. One of them was Liz Bazzini, who recounted her encounter more than a decade earlier in 1991. She had met a man in a restaurant who claimed to be recruiting for a James Bond movie. But as they sat together at the bar, Liz noticed something strange, a fine white powder floating on the surface of her drink. Alarmed, she excused herself to the bathroom and secretly called the manager for help. Determined to stall the man until authorities arrived, she returned and confronted him directly, asking about the powder. He insisted it was just sugar. Thinking quickly, Liz suggested they swap drinks, but before he could be forced to prove his claim, he fled the scene. Years later, when she heard about Kristine's disappearance, Liz became convinced it was the very same man. Another woman, Kristine Klugjian, told police a story that echoed Liz's in frightening detail. Back in 1989, she had met a man who introduced himself simply as John. After weeks of friendly conversation, he eventually invited her to what he described as a party in a hotel room. He claimed to work for Collier Records and promised big opportunities. After dinner, they drove back to the hotel together. But the moment Kristine stepped off the elevator, she realized something was terribly wrong. The hallway was completely silent, and there were no signs of any party. Instead, John led her into an empty hotel room. Almost immediately, his intentions became clear. He pulled out ropes hidden behind the bed and tried to restrain her. Terrified, Kristine fought back, managed to break free, and sprinted out of the room to safety. A man named Victor Paleologos, had previously been caught in another disturbing incident. Though he faced serious charges, he accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to just 3 years of probation. Even after 14 years, police remained relentless in their search for Kristine Johnson. Then, a breakthrough came. When the composite sketch was circulated, a parole officer recognized one of her parolers, Victor Paleologos, as a possible match. She immediately alerted investigators. Acting quickly, authorities obtained a search warrant for Paleologos' home. On his computer, they uncovered troubling photographs of men dressed in clothing identical to what Kristine had purchased on the day she vanished. Even more disturbing, investigators learned that Paleologos had instructed Susan Murphy to wear almost the exact same outfit to her supposed audition. A sinister pattern was beginning to emerge. But when detectives tried to locate Paleologos, they discovered he was already behind bars on unrelated charges for attempting to steal a car. Despite being in custody, investigators pressed him for answers about Kristine's disappearance. He refused to cooperate, offering no useful information. Paleologos claimed he had an alibi for February 15th, the day Kristine went missing. According to him, he had met a friend for a meal, a story that the friend confirmed. However, investigators weren't convinced. Records showed he didn't arrive at the IHOP restaurant until 5:30 p.m., leaving a large gap of time, plenty of opportunity for him to have encountered Kristine beforehand. Just 16 days after Kristine vanished, police asked Susan Murphy to participate in a lineup identification. Without hesitation, Susan pointed directly to Victor Paleologos as the man who had approached her. Detectives felt they were finally closing in. But just as Susan was leaving the station, Detective Virginia Ownson received a chilling phone call. A group of hikers had discovered a body in a gorge in the Hollywood Hills. Officers rushed to the scene, and their fears were realized. The remains of a young woman lay there, Kristine Johnson. The news was devastating. After weeks of agonizing uncertainty, Kristine's family finally had an answer, but it was one that shattered them. The autopsy confirmed what detectives already suspected. Kristine had been strangled to death. It was no longer a missing persons case, it was murder. Now, investigators faced a race against time. They were determined to bring Kristine's killer to justice. With his suspicious history, his connection to Susan Murphy, and his identification in the lineup, Victor Paleologos became the prime suspect. But prosecutors faced a significant challenge. There was no DNA evidence tying him directly to the crime. If they were going to secure justice for Kristine, they would need to build their case carefully, relying on witness testimony and circumstantial evidence. The trial of Victor Paleologos began on July 13, 2006, in court. Victims from his past finally had the chance to step forward, sharing their experiences and exposing his history as a repeat predator. Their testimonies, harrowing and consistent, were crucial in showing the jury the dangerous pattern he had followed for years. One of those women was Kathy, who described an encounter in 1999, for years before Kristine went missing. At the Westfield Century City Mall, a man approached her, introducing himself as Brian. He claimed he worked for Disney and told Kathy she would be perfect for a new James Bond film he was supposedly producing. But Kathy immediately sensed something was wrong. Disney didn't produce James Bond films. Suspicious, she asked for his business card before walking away. Alarmed, she told her father, a New York police officer, who warned her not to meet the man again. Though the man hadn't committed a crime at the time, Kathy's instincts told her he was dangerous. Determined to stop him, she agreed to meet him once more, but only after bringing a stuntman friend along for protection. In the end, the man never showed up. Kathy thought the story had ended there until years later, when she saw Victor Paleologos' photograph on television in connection to Kristine's disappearance. She realized it was the same man who had approached her at the mall in 1999. Now, she finally had the chance to speak out. Another woman, Heather Ma, also testified. In 1998, Paleologos had attempted to assault her. Though he had been caught and expressed remorse, the cycle continued. He was released on January 20th, 2003, after serving 3 years and 5 months in prison. Shockingly, within just 4 days of his release, he approached Susan Murphy, the same Susan whose testimony would later become pivotal in Kristine's case. Susan bravely recounted her story in court. On January 24, 2003, she was at the Century City Mall when a man introduced himself as Victor Thomas. He spoke confidently about the entertainment industry, inviting her to an audition the next day. Though he seemed convincing, something about his proposal unsettled her. After leaving, she called the Screen Actors Guild, only to learn that no James Bond film was in production. Determined not to let him trick someone else, Susan decided to confront him, but she took precautions. Armed with mace and a camera, and with her boyfriend Tony waiting nearby in the car, she met him again. During their meeting, he suggested grabbing a drink across the street before the so-called audition. But the building he pointed to looked abandoned. Sensing danger, Susan discreetly signaled to Tony's car, letting the man know she wasn't alone. The change in his demeanor was immediate. He grew nervous, then fled. Susan and Tony tried to stop him, even chasing him until they spotted him hiding in nearby trees. Though Susan escaped unharmed, she was shaken. She knew the man might target another woman, but since he hadn't technically committed a crime, police couldn't act. Just 3 weeks later, Kristine disappeared. At trial, Susan's testimony was vital. It revealed the disturbing blueprint of Paleologos' crimes. He would charm women with promises of Hollywood auditions, insist they purchase specific outfits, and lure them into dangerous situations. In total, 7 women courageously testified against him. Each account, on its own, might have seemed incomplete, but together they painted a chilling portrait of a serial predator who had hunted women across Hollywood for over a decade. Facing mounting evidence, Victor Paleologos agreed to a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. But, in a bizarre twist, he later submitted an 11-page handwritten letter asking to withdraw his guilty plea. The court rejected his request. On September 15, 2006, he was sentenced to 25 years to life for the murder of Kristine Johnson. For the women who testified, Kristine's story felt hauntingly familiar, could have been any one of them. Though most had never met her, they honored her memory by speaking the truth and ensuring her killer was finally stopped. For Kristine's family, the verdict brought long-awaited answers. Though nothing could erase their pain, there was solace in knowing that Paleologos would never again prey on another young woman. In Kristine's name, they began advocating for survivors of assault, urging others to come forward and reminding the world that every voice matters in the pursuit of justice. If you found this case fascinating, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We share new true crime stories every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant, and stay safe.